Mailed Mail Changeling Chainmail Exchange. Written by Ragos. Part 2. When she came back into the living room with a bottle of cider in her mouth, she found him lounging on the couch with his legs all stretched out like he owned the place. He'd also shapeshifted to look like he was wearing a bluish-gray Royal Guard armor that the Unicorn Division usually wore, but as a changeling. Upon seeing his disarming smile, Scabby set her bottle down on the coffee table and silently trudged over to the spot where she'd left the sledgehammer embedded in the floor. It took her a fair bit of heaving, but she eventually wrenched it free and cheerfully trotted over to join him. She sat on the opposite end of the couch and left the sledgehammer leaning on the armrest well within easy reach. She grinned when she saw his smile falter.
Okay. Talk.
She said after taking a swig of cider.
Well, since you've already had a practical demonstration, I think we can jump straight into the business proposal.
He said, casting a glance at her original set of tarnished armor sitting rather forlornly next to the coffee table.
You need armor that actually fits you properly, and I need emotional sustenance. Just think about it. You get self-regenerating armor that never needs maintenance, aside from your appreciation, and you'll never need to go into that crotchety Quartmaster for refit ever again. That's a total win-win for both of us.
Scabby scrunched her muzzle and squirmed a little.
I don't know. Seems a little creepy. Was the mailman in on it?
He shrugged.
Only if you think too hard about it. And no, the mailman didn't even know it's in the box. Come on, give me a little credit.
Are you sure I can't just give you a hug instead?
You could, and it'll definitely keep me going for a couple of days, if you really mean it. But I'm thinking long-term.
He tapped his head with a hoof and smiled.
A symbiotic relationship, or business partner if you prefer, would be a much better investment.
His smile then slipped off as his ears drooped.
Also, I've spent so much time coming up with this concept and perfecting my shapeshifting to overcome that dumb conservation of mass problem that I really don't want to have wasted all that time and effort. Sunk cost fallacy's hitting me super hard right now.
Why not just go back to the hive? I'm sure they'll teach you whatever mumbo jumbo they did to turn into their...
She paused, searching for the right word to describe the aggressively gaudy mix of pinks, purples, and greens in the last changeling she's seen.
prettier forms?
Ha! You can't even say it with a straight face. Who wants to look like a rainbow puked on them?
Someone who doesn't want to starve?
Scabby folded her legs and stared at him with half-lidded eyes.
Bears can't be choosers.
I can if I want to, so there.
He said, sticking his forked tongue out.
I'm not that desperate yet.
So, am I, like, the last thing standing between you and becoming a rainbow reindeer?
If I say yes, will that make you more inclined to partner up?
He leaned up against the couch's backrest and grinned as he swept a hoof from his face to his belly.
I mean, you wouldn't wish that fate on a handsome bugger like me, right?
Scabby continued to give him a deadpan look.
Oof, tough crowd.
Tough luck. Tick-tock, mister.
Right. Back on topic.
His smile brightened up again, and he raised a hoof as he spoke, as if he was about to drop a doozy of a revelation on her unsuspecting brain.
In addition to all advantages you've already experienced, Changeling Chainmail also comes with the benefit of...
Victor frowned as his words petered out, and he slowly lowered his hoof, blinking like somebody who couldn't quite believe that the milk had run out as he was just pouring it into his cereal.
Actually, that about covers it.
He finished lamely.
Wait, really?
She cocked an eyebrow.
That's all you got?
Well, if you don't mind the risk of looking a little different from the standard you're on closer expansion, it's got better weather versatility. Extra fluff on demand in winter, for example.
She gave him a non-committal hum.
Look, the concept is literally living armor that feeds on your appreciation. You read the pamphlet or tried me out yourself. Equal protection with better mobility comfort, plus a few utilitarian features, with only a tiny fraction of the usual maintenance required.
Sphincter said as he tapped a hoof on his breastplate. He then huffed and shook his head.
There really isn't a whole lot more to it. Like, what else do you want from me?
Gabby took another gulp of her cider. Good gear was hard to come by, and doubly so for earth ponies her size. Plus, the Royal Guard were scheduled to be in a parade next week, which would mean spending a whole week tinkering with her armor to make it presentable, She could save a whole lot of time and effort by taking him up on his offer, and darn it, she was already dreading the thought of wearing her standard issue tin can after experiencing the sublime comfort and efficiency of Changeling Chainmail. Unfortunately, there was the inescapable fact that it involves sorta being inside a changeling. After grinding her teeth in silence for a couple of seconds, she groaned softly and shook her head.
Yeah, I don't think this is going to work. It's a neat idea and all, and kinda tempting if I'm being honest. But it sounds way too much like a weird relationship. That's probably going to get us into a whole lot of trouble if anybody finds out. I don't know if I can do this.
Didn't answer. He simply drooped his head until he was staring at his hooves. An awkward silence seeped into the living room. Scabby averted her gaze, fully expecting an attempt to guilt trip her with weapons-grade puppy dog eyes, or whatever the bug equivalent might be. She just needed to give him a little more time for the realization to sink in, and then maybe she could convince him to seek help elsewhere, preferably with someone who actually knew how to deal with remnant changelings. After a minute had passed, she hopped off the couch and said,
Look, let me get you something for the road, and I'll...
Say, how do you feel about flying?
Her heart skipped a beat, and she froze in mid-step, ears perked. Slowly, she turned to face him and said,
Come again?
Sphincter shifted in his haunches with a straight posture, and his translucent wings transformed to a pair of feathery ones in a flash of green flame. He then spread them out and wiggled his eye ridges, saying,
Would you like to fly? And I don't mean like being carried around in a sky chariot or floated around by a unicorn. I mean flying like a real Pegasus.
Her treacherous heart fluttered again. Every Earth pony had to fantasize about flying at some point in their life, and anybody who claimed otherwise was a filthy liar. A memory leapt up from the depths of her mind, of her younger self making whooshing noises as she galloped across the meadow, pretending the swirls of dandelion seeds she picked up were actual clouds as she soared in the sky.
You can really make that possible for me?
She half whispered. His smirk oozed back into his face like honey dribbling onto a pancake. Scabby gulped.
Oh, hayseed.
He totally had her, hook, line, and sinker, and he knew it.
I can't believe I let you talk me into this.
Scabby muttered as she crouched on the roof's edge. Canterlot's decommissioned printing press was built on a ledge and had one side of the building flush with the cliff on the Canterhorn. It offered a stunning view to the valley below Canterlot, with practically zero obstructions between her and an impact that was bound to do more than stun her. At least it was mercifully deserted, unlike the grand public balcony on Celestial Street. Although it wasn't all that unusual to see Pegasi leaping into the sky from there, the last thing she needed was some pony recognizing her, an Earth pony, jumping off the mountain. The fact that she'd seemingly sprouted a pair of feathery wings was probably going to invite a whole lot of uncomfortable questions too. So, to the old printing press it was.
This is insane.
She repeated, thumping a hoof on her breastplate. She had to constantly remind herself that her armor was, in fact, a disguised changeling. The hard thing was so comfortable, she could forget she was wearing it. Sphincter didn't answer verbally, since armor didn't tend to have mouths, but he did have a pair of wings, and he'd done a decent job of matching her coat color and making them look like they were connected to her back rather than the armor itself. He used them to give her a couple of reassuring pats on the shoulder, and then bent them in front of her, curling his feathers and leaving one on each wing sticking out perpendicularly from the others, in an uncanny imitation of Griffish double thumbs up gesture. Scabby peered over the edge again and bit back a whimper. From this height, the forest looked more like a green doormat, and she couldn't even take solace in the possibility of being saved by a few stray clouds floating below if anything went wrong. Because Earth Pony.
Suffer not the Earth Pony, but for it is thick and covered in mud.
Clouds were racist. For the umpteenth time, she checked the straps and buckles to make sure they were secure. Sphincter had made some additional changes to the standard armor template, which mainly involved bigger straps with extra padding on the inside surfaces to reduce chafing, since it would now carry her instead of the other way around. He had also added some rudimentary eyes on the helmet so that he could at least have some limited vision whilst flying for her. They could pass for discolored metal studs for the casual observer, but Scabby thought the beady little dots looked more like spider eyes. She wouldn't be the one controlling the wings, but he assured her that he could read enough of her body language to make his responses feel natural, if she didn't just outright tell him what she wanted to do. He'd also assured her that he could remain in control of their flight even if she fainted or started flailing around in a panic. He'd already proven that he could carry her in flight, It was how they had gotten into the roof of the abandoned building in the first place. It had been a somewhat janky experience, similar to being personally ferried around by her winged comrades in the Royal Guard training, but he assured her that he was still just getting used to her weight, and that soaring would be much smoother ride. Come to think of it, that was an awful lot of assurances she was relying on. Maybe this was all some sort of elaborate ruse to make her jump off a cliff.
No. Stop that. Eye on the prize. Flying.
Wanted to assassinate her, he probably could have done it already, and in a far less convoluted and unreliable ways. Scabby took in a deep breath to steady her trembling legs and let out a whoosh.
Okay, let's do this. If I die, I'm haunting you.
Sphincter gave her another thumbs up, and she swallowed dryly and leapt off the edge of the roof. For a moment, she felt frozen in time, suspended a couple of miles above the valley with her legs dangling freely beneath her. The trees were no more than green fuzz, the rivers and lakes no more than bits of glass reflecting the sun's rays, her hooves so unnaturally far away from the earth, it almost felt blasphemous, a violation of some natural law that made her heart skip a couple of beats. And then, gravity laid down the law. Down, down, down she went. The chilly wind absolutely roared in her ears, clawing and biting at her exposed coat, skin and eyes as she hurtled towards the ground. She was kinda grateful for the noise, because there was no way any mortal pony could clench as hard as she did without squeezing air out of her front or rear orifice like some type of amateur's first attempt at the bagpipes. Her limbs were lock stiff, and she could barely turn her head enough to squint at the mountainside whooshing past her in a blur. Black, inky spots concealed in her vision. Then, she gasped for breath, and the influx of pristine air undid her petrification. Scabby legs wobbled unsteadily, threatening to send her spinning, but with some effort, she managed to straighten them out like a Pegasus would in a dive. Meanwhile, Sphincter had spread his wings. They weren't yet angled yet properly to catch the air. He was waiting for her. Gritting her teeth, she raised her left foreleg slightly to indicate her desire to bank to the right, and she felt her heart swell when Sphincter's wings responded accordingly. She felt gravity and deceleration pressing down on her as she angled them to catch more air, until they had leveled out and settled into a swift glide that followed the curvature of the Canterhorn's eastern face. She spotted a couple of eagles nesting at a scraggly tree that they breezed past, and even a trail of ponies slowly marching up the old winding road up to Camelot.
Sup, dudes?
Scabby cried when she cut across the flight path of the flock of geese. After putting some distance between herself and their indignant honking, she raised her head and relaxed her limbs until they dangled loosely, indicating her desire to slow down and level out. Sphincter complied and pumped his wings for a bit to decelerate, then spread them out again to catch the rising thermals for a leisurely glide. At least Scabby thought that's what he was doing. She didn't have the slightest clue what riding a thermal could feel like, as opposed to a standard updraft. She cruised for a bit, simply soaking in the sun's rays and the magnificent view of the forest, rivers, and lakes below. When her thumping heart was ready for a little more excitement, she straightened out her legs and threw her weight to the right.
Whoa!
She cried when Sphincter rewarded her with a barrel roll. Fighting back an hysterical giggle, Scabby pitched herself down a little aggressively and then gasped when Sphincter tugged in his wings and allowed her to tumble forward. The world flipped once, twice, and then a third time before he spread his wings to rapidly decelerate. Scabby threw her head up and cackled. Her armor gave a brief, full-body hug in response. She sighed and closed her eyes as they settled into a gentle glide once more. They were roughly at the midway point of the mountain's height, and a safe distance from the rocky outcroppings and trees, so she had plenty of room to drift safely. It was almost comfortable enough for napping, being snugly suspended in her armor and caressed by a breeze like that. If Scabby concentrated, she could have sworn she even felt Sphincter's wings as they were her own. Cold air rustled each feather, and every shift in the wind's directions or pressure sent a perceptible jolt down the length of the erect limbs to the armor, which then rocked her body, much like a cartwheel with a decent suspension hitting a bump in the road.
The ground ponies, eat your hearts out!
Scabby grinned when she opened her eyes and spotted a lone cloud. It looked a little stretched out and wispy, probably after drifting far from the weather factory as a reject sample for being neglected by the weather team. She'd always wondered what it was like to go through one. Would she come out damp and sprinkled with water droplets on the other side? She pitched forward and dove right towards the cloud.
Oh, it's actually better than it looks.
She thought as she got closer and closer.
Maybe I should... Oof!
The cloud hit her. The initial impact drove all of her breath out in a wheeze, and she bounced almost a full story's height into the air before she fell back into the mass of white fluff. Although her muzzle and limbs felt absolutely nothing but damp air as she tumbled and bounced around the cloud, she felt as if some pony was repeatedly whacking the armored parts of her body with a rubber mallet every time she hit its wispy surface. Sphincter's wings flailed and flapped haphazardly, but she got smacked a couple of times as they bounced and then slid down the incline in the cloud's trailing end. Scabby tried to grab onto something, anything, but her hooves passed right through the vapor, and then she yelped when they went over the edge. She wasn't good at judging altitude on the fly, but she figured they probably had less than 30 seconds before spreading themselves thinly across the trees and rocks below. Sphincter's wings flapped and twitched erratically, like a bird after it bonked itself into a glass window.
Oh, crud! Oh, crud! Oh, crud!
The armor jerked hard, punching out her breath as Sphincter's wings straightened out to arrest their fall. She gritted her teeth as they slowly, anguishedly pulled out with a straight drop to an angled swoop. She only just managed to raise her forelegs in time to protect her face before the tallest tree top started smacking her all over. In the next instant, she felt herself rising again as Sphincter pulled out of the swoop and flapped his wings like an exhausted chicken. Scabby peeped through the gap between her forelegs and saw a sparkling expanse of crystal blue water before her. They'd gotten clear of the woods and were bleeding off the rest of their momentum, only a couple of stories high above the one of the lakes below Candlelot.
Whew, that was close. Ah!
She cried when Sphincter's wings suddenly went limp. She retained enough sense to hold onto a little breath she had left in her lungs when she plunged into the icy water, but she nearly let it all out when she felt her armor's weight dragging her down into the shadowy depths. But just as Scabby began pawing at the straps, a flash of green light followed by a swarm of bubbles obscured her vision, and she felt herself rising. She broke the surface with a gasp and blinked as she found herself bobbing along with gentle waves fanned along by a breeze. Glancing downwards, Sphincter had transformed to what felt like a foam vest, looking very much like the one the foal's life jacket is designed to resemble Royal Guard armor. His wings had disappeared along with her helmet, and he did not respond when she prodded him a couple of times. He was pretty soft and comfy in addition to being sufficiently buoyant for an adult mare her size, so she had no difficulty paddling into the shore, despite having been whipped by tree branches after falling out of the sky. Speaking of which, a quick glance skyward confirmed that no pony had been close enough to hear or see her little accidents, so she would have to put up with a company of rescuers or busybodies. Once she dragged herself up to the pebbly beach, her life jacket unfastened itself, then peeled itself off her back and transformed into Sphincter, who groaned and flopped into the ground alongside her like a half-dead fish.
Oh, grub. That's a real ouchie.
He said, scrunching up his muzzle as he massaged his forehead with a hoof. Green gouts of flame sputtered from his horn.
What did we even hit up there? Please don't tell me it was a goose.
We hit a cloud. I don't know how it happened, but that cloud somehow didn't want to let me through.
Scabby then paused halfway through wringing out her tail when she noticed him staring at her.
What?
She asked.
You aimed for a cloud? Why?
I wanted to go right through it, duh. I thought it'd be fun, since earth ponies usually can't... Wait. Can changelings walk on clouds? Are they solid to you guys like Pegasi?
Sphincter collapsed onto his back and snorted.
Yes, changelings can walk on clouds. Guess I should have included that in the briefing. Whoops.
Wow, clouds were racist to earth ponies. Well, technically to unicorns as well, but at least they had the option of cheating right back with their cheaty magic. Scabby frowned as she tried to recall if any part of her training had mentioned changelings being able to walk on clouds. Had there been a manual at all? She couldn't remember.
Well, I guess there's enough whoopsies to go around.
She muttered.
Why didn't you do anything when we were heading straight for it?
He paused for a moment.
Was it spread out and dispersed?
She shrugged.
Kinda, I guess.
That would explain it. In case you haven't noticed, my eyes are pretty lousy when I'm pretending to be your armor.
They lay on their backs for a while, waiting for their heavy breathing to subside as they listened for the lapping of the water on the shore and the chirping of the birds. Scabby's heart didn't quite settle so quickly, though not with her mind constantly drifting back into the sky, soaring on borrowed wings without a care in a world. Sphincter flicked his tongue out like a snake and smirked.
So, was it as good for you as it was for me?
Oh, shut up.
She huffed as she tossed a pebble at him, grinning in spite of herself.
Okay, fine. Flying is awesome, and I want to do it again.
Yes, a satisfied customer.
He pumped a hoof in the air and cackled.
Just one thing. You do know what you turned into was plate mail, right?
Alliteration is better marketing.
Huh. I guess I'll take your word for it.
Scabby rolled her eyes.
Where did you get the idea from anyway?
his translucent wings suddenly flushed with brighter shades of blue and yellows. Was that the changeling equivalent of blushing?
Iron Mare.
He said with a weak smile.
Well, you can tell her that she's a genius! And Equestria needs more smart girls like her.
Sphincter blinked a couple of times.
But she's not Never mind. I'm sure she appreciate the sentiment.
He then scooted a little closer to her and stretched out his hoof, grinning conspiratorially.
So, what do you think, partner?
She paused for a moment to turn her gaze skyward, and her heart fluttered as the thought of soaring above the clouds once more. It couldn't hurt to at least give Sphincter a chance, right? Probably could do it with making a friend as well, since Princess Twilight would frown on her if she did it solely for her own personal enjoyment. It was worth a shot. For flying. For friendship, too. Can't forget that one. Scabby mashed his grin and bumped his hoof.
You got it, partner.
There we go. Before anything else, please make sure to go check out Lotus Moon. I will be leaving her in the description and leaving her... Perfect, because I'm going to be leaving bloopers too. I'll also be leaving her in the comments down below. However, I would like to thank my wonderful Patreons first. Thank you, my tier 1 Patreons, Squall, Windfeather, Rainflicker, Starlight Blaze, Dreamless Portal, Nine Tiny Equine, and Stewhex. My tier 2 Patreons, Chase Lemaster, Sword Brethren Mordred, Solus, RD Bryant, Captain Blueshadow, HKH4, aka Texture, and the Animated Ghost. And of course a large thank you to Silent Titan. I appreciate your guys' support so much and it means a ton to me. That aside, however, besides these bloopers, thank you guys so much for watching. This has been Firehearth. Have a wonderful day. He blinked.
I'm as fine as organic nourishment is. Ah! No, the alarm for my bake. Fuck. Oh, my changeling bake, full of love. From my Trexie.
Okay, that's going to the bloopers.
Wait. I'm sorry, I need to inject some humor into this recording somehow.
If she jumped or shook herself, she had no doubt that she would clink like a box, like a box of brass instruments. I fucked up in the blooper. Oh my god. It turned out just to be 4 hoof guards short of a full set, but it still shamed her own armor. It still shamed her own armor with its pristine condition. God.
I'm willing to help you if I can, but as far as you being my guest is concerned, fucking planes!
She set it down on the floor in front of her in front of her couch. Damn it.
Whew, that was close. Ah! God. 1, sorry for your ears. 2, my throat. That hurt.
It taunted her with with lazy memories, no hazy memories. Drunk, not dead. Fuck. Scabby blinked as the says Mare, but I'm changing the stallion because I couldn't hire 2 female VA artists. That's going at the end of the video.